The old Mustang's bumper was the last thing I worked on that day, and I took my time rubbing the chrome until I could see my own face in it, clear and sharp in the late afternoon light. Across the street, the Garrison gas station had a faded sign taped to the inside of the office window that said, "For sale by owner," and I looked from my reflection to the sign, feeling the weight of the thick roll of cash in my pocket. It was almost enough, the result of years of work and careful saving, and the feeling of it was solid and real. Sal came out of the garage wiping his hands on a red rag, and he stopped beside me, following my gaze to the station. He saw the edge of the money when I shifted my weight, and he just nodded slowly, his old face covered in fine lines. He pointed with his chin toward the faint shape of the Kingsport skyline, a smudge of gray on the horizon. "Careful, kid. Up there, they own the game. For guys like us, the best we can hope for is not to be a pawn they decide to sacrifice." I just smiled at him because I didn't believe it. I believed in the work of my hands and the discipline my parents taught me. My world was small, but it was honest, built on early mornings and long hours fixing engines nobody else could figure out. I lived in a clean apartment above a bakery, and at night, I would study engine diagrams or talk to my parents over a video call, their faces proud and tired as they encouraged my dream from halfway across the world. My life was simple, and everything in it was aimed at that one goal: buying the station and making it mine. Inside the garage, a small television was playing a political ad, and I saw a man with gray hair and a perfect suit standing with his family. It was Senator Thomas Fletcher, a man whose picture was on signs all over the state, and he spoke about law and order while his son stood beside him looking bored. His daughter Annalise was there too, and she just looked uncomfortable, like she wanted to be anywhere else. I turned my attention back to the Mustang, because the Fletchers and their world had nothing to do with me. I learned later what happened that night, every single detail of how my life was unmade. It started at the Fletcher estate, in a room that was probably bigger than my entire apartment. The senator was angry with his son Nate, yelling about his lack of ambition and his irresponsibility. Nate was 22 years old and already drunk, and he stormed out of the house after the argument, full of rage and entitlement. He got into his dark sedan and decided to drive, not on the main highways but on the back roads that led into Garrison, pushing the car faster and faster to blow off steam. He was distracted, a bottle open on the seat beside him, and he didn't see the pedestrian until the last second. He hit her, and in a moment of pure, selfish panic, he just kept driving, leaving her broken on the side of the road. He made it back to the estate, the front of his car crumpled and his face pale with terror. He confessed everything to his father, and Senator Fletcher's anger immediately vanished, replaced by something cold and pragmatic. The problem was not his son's crime, but the threat it posed to his re-election campaign. He called his security chief, a big, quiet man named Gunner. Gunner confirmed the worst news. The victim was a local teacher, and she was in critical condition. There was a witness who saw a dark sedan speeding away from the area, not far from my gas station. That was all Senator Fletcher needed to hear, because he saw an opportunity, a solution. Gunner's team ran a quick background check on me, and they found what they needed: a small irregularity in my parents' immigration status, a piece of paper that could be used as a weapon. Fletcher gave the order and Gunner executed it with perfect efficiency. They broke a piece from Nate's headlight and planted it in the back of my garage. They paid the witness a large sum of money to change his story and identify my car. The senator made a call to the county sheriff, a man who owed his job to the Fletcher political machine, and the security footage from the cameras at my station, the footage that would have proved I was working on a car all night, simply disappeared. While all this was happening, Gunner himself paid a visit to my parents. He didn't raise his voice, and he didn't make threats. He just explained to them very clearly that, if I fought the charges, if I made any trouble at all, they would be deported immediately. They were good people who had worked hard their whole lives, and they were terrified. A few days after I was convicted, Gunnar carried out the threat anyway, and they were quietly put on a plane and sent away, cut off from me completely. The police came for me the next morning. They kicked in the door to my apartment and dragged me out while I was still trying to understand what was happening. I was isolated, my parents were silenced, and the full weight of a system I never knew existed came down on me. I saw Annalise once during this time, a glimpse of her in a hallway at the police station where her father was talking to the sheriff. She saw me in handcuffs and her face went white with horror. Her father put a hand on her arm and guided her away, his expression a cold mask. Her silence was another part of their plan, another piece of the wall they built around me. The trial was a blur of lies and fabricated evidence. My lawyer was overwhelmed and the prosecutor was confident, presenting a case that was airtight because it had been built that way. When the judge read the guilty verdict, I felt something inside me just go still. The fight was over, and I had lost without ever understanding the rules of the game. I stopped struggling, and I let my eyes move across the courtroom, over the faces of the jury and the lawyers, until they found the Fletcher family sitting in the front row. The senator looked relieved, and Nate looked like nothing had happened at all. Then I saw Annalise. She was staring right at me, and her eyes were not filled with the malice of her father or the emptiness of her brother. Her face was a landscape of pure, soul-deep terror and guilt. That was the last thing I saw before they took me away, the image of her tormented conscience, the one single flaw in their perfect crime. The state gives you back 8 years of your life in a cardboard box. Inside are the clothes you were arrested in, a wallet with $37, and a bus ticket to a city you no longer recognize. They call it a release, but it is just a different kind of exile. My parents were gone, their small store shuttered, their visas revoked in the quiet fallout of my conviction. They had been sent back to a country they barely remembered, casualties of a war they never knew they were fighting. Vengeance was not a feeling anymore. It was a structure I had built inside myself, beam by beam, in the silence of a cell. In prison, I learned that every man has a trade. A quiet accountant who stole millions taught me how the wealthy hide their sins in plain numbers, in ledgers and expense reports that look like simple bookkeeping. He called it the philosophy of wealth, the belief that money could bend reality. A former investigator taught me how to construct a new reality from nothing, a digital ghost with a verifiable past. He showed me how to become someone else so completely that I could forget who I was. His price was a portion of the commissary I earned cleaning the kitchens. The accountant's price was just having someone to listen. I became Ben Huang. The name felt like a borrowed coat, stiff and unfamiliar. My prison contact, a man who organized the lives of others for a living, made the arrangements. Ben Huang had a clean record, a history as a private driver for a family in another state, and impeccable references that dissolved into dead ends if you looked too closely. He was unremarkable, a blank space, a perfect servant. My contact found the opening. The Fletcher family's driver of 12 years had a gambling problem. A secret gunner, their security chief, had failed to notice until it became a liability. Gunnar needed a replacement, someone quiet and immediate, someone who could be slipped into place before the senator noticed the disruption. My contact presented Ben Huang as the solution to a problem Gunnar didn't want his boss to know existed. Gunnar was a large man who filled the doorway of the estate's security office. He had short gray hair and a face that seemed carved from stone, his eyes missing nothing. He reviewed Ben Huang's file in complete silence, his stillness a physical pressure in the room. He did not look at me once. He looked at the paper, at the fiction we had built. "You have a 90-day probationary period," he said, finally closing the folder. His voice was low and flat. "You will be watched. Every route you take, every minute you are late or early, every word you speak. We value discretion. We require invisibility. Is that understood?" I gave him a slight, respectful nod. He stood and walked me to the garage, a cavern of polished concrete and high-end vehicles. He handed me the keys to a black sedan. "This is your vehicle. It is to be kept immaculate. Senator Fletcher is to be driven in the town car. Mr. Nathaniel prefers the SUV. Miss Annalise will tell you her preference. Your schedule is on the tablet in the driver's console. Do not deviate from it unless instructed by a member of the family or myself." The infiltration was complete, but I was inside a cage, under the constant gaze of a very patient predator. The car became my world. It was a silent, leather-lined chamber where I learned the geography of my enemy. I drove the senator to political fundraisers where he spoke of integrity and family values. I drove Nate to clubs and to the apartments of women whose names he forgot by morning. I drove Annalise to a small law clinic in a forgotten part of the city. Nate treated me like part of the car, a component that responded to his commands. One afternoon, he slouched in the back seat, talking loudly on his phone to a friend. "You have no idea," Nate said, his voice slick with alcohol and arrogance. "My old man can make anything go away. Anything. You think your little DUI is a problem? Trust me, it's not a problem." He laughed. My hands were steady on the wheel. My face, reflected in the rearview mirror, was a blank mask. The next day, I offered him a new phone, a simple burner unit. "For your privacy, Mr. Fletcher," I said, my voice quiet and neutral, "so your calls are your own." He took it with a greedy smirk. He liked the idea of secrets, of having a life separate from his father's constant oversight. He did not know the phone was a listening device, a direct line into his careless, entitled world. 2 nights later, he used it to call the same friend, drunk again, bragging. "I'm telling you, man, 8 years ago, I had this situation, a really big problem. And poof," he said, snapping his fingers near the phone's microphone. "It disappeared. My dad made it disappear. I recorded it all. The audio was clear. It was a son's drunken boast, not a confession. It was not enough to undo a senator, but it was the first stone. And Lise was different. She sat in the front seat, a small act of defiance against her family's hierarchy. She was thin and wore simple sweaters and jeans, clothes that seemed chosen to make her disappear. Her eyes were always tired, clouded with a sadness that felt old and heavy. She worked at a pro bono clinic, a place of worn-out furniture and overflowing case files, a world away from her family's manicured estate. The guilt I had seen in her eyes in that courtroom 8 years ago was still there, now a permanent part of her face. I knew I had to use it. One afternoon, driving her back from the clinic, she was quieter than usual, staring out the window at the rain-streaked streets. The silence in the car was thick with her misery. I decided to break character, just for a moment. It was a calculated risk. "My father was a mechanic," I said, my voice soft. It was the first time I had offered any personal detail. She turned from the window, surprised. "He had a specific way of cleaning his hands. He would use this industrial soap, the kind with sand in it, and he would scrub for 5 minutes straight after his shift. But there was always a little grease left, deep in the lines of his knuckles. He said it was a sign of an honest day's work. It was a true memory, a perfect sharp piece of my old life, and I was using it as a weapon." She looked at my hands on the steering wheel. "What happened to him?" "He's gone," I said. The lie was simple, but the truth it covered was not. The prod worked. She saw a flicker of humanity in the quiet driver, a hint of a life beyond her family's cold orbit. She began to talk. It started small, vague complaints about her father's pressure or her brother's recklessness. Then it grew. She spoke of living with a secret, a weight that never went away. I just listened, my quiet presence, an invitation for her to pour out the poison that was killing her from the inside. A bond was forming, a dangerous thing built on my deception and her desperation. The 8th anniversary of the hit and run arrived on a cold, gray Tuesday. I knew the date. I had counted every single one of them for 8 years. Annalise was a wreck. She came out of the house with her face pale and her movements unsteady. "Just drive, Ben," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I drove for hours, through the city and out onto the highways that cut through the countryside. She didn't say a word. The sun went down, and the world outside the windows became a blur of passing lights. Finally, on a dark, empty road miles from anywhere, she started to cry. It was not a quiet sadness, but a storm of grief that shook her entire body. I pulled the car over to the side of the road and put it in park. I did not say anything. I just waited. "This family is built on a lie," she sobbed, her words broken. "We ruined an innocent man's life. We destroyed him just to protect my brother." She did not say my name, but she did not have to. I had it. Confirmation from a witness, from a member of the family. I looked at her, her face buried in her hands, her trust in me absolute. The victory felt cold and hollow. To use her confession, I had to complete the betrayal. The stakes were no longer just about my name. They were about her. Gunnar's paranoia was a constant, low-grade fever. As my 90-day review approached, I felt his scrutiny intensify. There were new security sweeps, subtle changes in the digital protocols on the estate's network. He was looking for something. I had been careful, but careful is never enough with a man like Gunnar. He was not looking for a mistake, he was looking for perfection, because perfection itself is a flaw, an anomaly. Weeks earlier, I had found a small USB drive on the floor of the garage and returned it to him. It seemed like the act of an honest employee. The drive was a plant, loaded with a sophisticated keylogger. Now, his system-wide sweep found it. He would not know who planted it, but he would know one of the staff was an infiltrator. The quiet war was over. The hunt had begun. Time was running out. I knew from overheard conversations that the senator kept a digitally encrypted ledger of all sensitive payments. The payoffs to the witness, the victim's family, the sheriff. It was the smoking gun. I needed the password. I waited, watching the estate's network traffic from a laptop in my small, bare apartment. The senator was working late in his home office. I saw him log into his secure financial system. The keylogger I had planted transmitted the password. I immediately initiated a remote download of the encrypted ledger. It was a massive file. I knew the transfer would trigger every alarm in Gunnar's security network. It was a loud, desperate move, but it was the only one I had left. The download completed. I had the ledger. A moment later, I saw a new alert flicker across my screen. A high-level security warning on the senator's office terminal. Gunnar now knew not only that I was the infiltrator, but he knew exactly what I had just stolen. The confession had unsettled Annalise. My calculated moment of humanity had worked too well. It had opened a door for her, but it had also planted a seed of curiosity. A few days later, racked with guilt, she sat alone in her office at the clinic. She searched online for news articles about the hit and run, about the man whose life her family had ruined. She found an old news clip, a local station's interview with my parents from the week of my trial. They were pleading for help, for anyone to believe their son. She watched my father speak. He was a broken man, his face etched with a grief she recognized. He described his son, the honest mechanic, the boy who worked so hard. And then he said it. He talked about how I was just like him, how after a long day working on engines, I would scrub my hands raw with industrial soap, but there was always a little grease left in the lines of my knuckles. He called it the mark of an honest day's work. The exact words. The same intimate, personal detail her driver had shared with her in a moment of quiet confidence. The connection clicked into place with the force of a physical blow. That night, she came to my apartment. The building was old and smelled of damp and fried food. She knocked on my door, her face ashen in the dim hallway light. I opened it and saw the look in her eyes. It was not trust or sadness. It was the dawning, sickening horror of understanding. My father ruined a man whose parents were deported after he was sent to prison, she began, her voice shaking. I found an old video of them. That man's father, he had a certain way of cleaning his hands. She stared at me, waiting. For a single, fatal second, the mask of Ben Huang disintegrated. The cold, disciplined control I had maintained for months vanished, and all that was left was the raw, 8-year-old fury of Jin Kai. It was the same look I had given her in the courtroom as they led me away. She recoiled, a hand flying to her mouth as she breathed the words. "It's you." Her trust was not just broken, it was annihilated by the depth of my manipulation. At that exact moment, the apartment door burst inward, splintering off its hinges. Gunnar stood there, flanked by 2 of his men. The game was over. I did not hesitate. I threw the single wooden chair at them and dove through the cheap glass of the window. I landed hard on the rusted metal of a fire escape 2 floors down, the impact jarring my bones. Shouts echoed from the room above. I scrambled down the ladder into the darkness of the back alley, a fugitive with a hard drive full of evidence and nowhere to go. Hiding in the city's shadows, in the forgotten spaces between buildings, I was completely alone. I was hunted by Fletcher's men who operated outside the law, and I was now a monster in the eyes of the one person who might have been an ally. I had the proof to destroy them, but the victory felt like ashes in my mouth. I had become just like them, a manipulator who used people as tools, who saw kindness as a weakness to be exploited. Revenge was not enough. Simply leaking the data and watching their empire burn was not enough. It was a fire that would consume everything, including what was left of me. I had to do more than destroy them. I had to use the system they had corrupted, the very laws they had twisted, to bring about their complete and total legal ruin. My purpose sharpened, moving past my own stolen life and focusing on justice for the family they had shattered. The first 24 hours were a blur of alleys and shadows, of staying low and moving only when the city slept. I found a bed in a transient hotel that asked for cash and no questions. The hard drive was a lead weight in my pocket, a single point of failure that contained everything. I knew Fletcher's men would be everywhere, a private army with no rules of engagement. I was out of time, my options shrinking with every passing hour. My phone vibrated. It was a new number, an encrypted line. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Her voice was strained, the sound stretched thin over the line. I know a reporter. His name is David Chen. He works out of the capital. He's the only one I trust not to take a payoff. I was silent for a long moment, listening to the sound of her breathing. My father came to my apartment after you were gone, she said, her voice dropping lower. He told me everything. He said you were a threat to be neutralized, that my loyalty was to this family. He didn't show a single moment of regret, only anger that his perfect world had been disturbed. I saw him for what he is. I will not be a part of it anymore. Why are you doing this? I asked. My own voice sounded strange, rough from disuse. For me, she said, and there was a new kind of steel in her tone. This isn't for you or for your revenge. This is for me. I need the truth to come out, because I can't live with the lie anymore. We made a plan. It was desperate and full of risk, built on the fragile trust between a deceiver and the woman he had deceived. The target was his election night party at the Kingsport Grand Hotel, the moment of his greatest triumph. The entire state's media would be there. It was the biggest stage. The place of fall would be the most absolute. Annalise used her credentials to get David Chen and his small camera crew into the hotel's media hub, a series of conference rooms converted into a temporary nerve center for the press. I entered through a service door in the sub-basement, my face hidden under a dark baseball cap, my body wrapped in the nondescript work jacket of a maintenance man. I knew Gunnar would anticipate this moment. He would be hunting me, and he would expect me to go for Annalise or the reporter. My only job was to be the target he couldn't ignore. I found a security panel in a utility closet and patched my burner phone into the hotel's internal camera system. I cycled through the feeds until I found him, a shark moving through the crowded waters of the ballroom floor, his eyes scanning every face. I found a camera in a quiet corridor on the second floor, a blind spot with no other coverage nearby. I walked into its frame, pulled down my cap, and looked directly into the lens for 3 full seconds before melting back into the stairwell. It was an invitation. The hotel's service levels were a maze of concrete and steel, a cold, functional skeleton hidden beneath the opulent skin of the party upstairs. The air smelled of ozone and industrial cleaner. I could hear the distant bass of the campaign music from the ballroom, a steady pulse that felt like a countdown clock. I heard the solid thud of a fire door closing 2 levels below me. He was coming. I kept moving, leading him deeper into the guts of the building, away from the media hub, away from Annalise. He cornered me in a long, narrow service corridor lined with massive ventilation ducts. The noise was immense, a constant roar of air that swallowed all other sound. Gunnar was a silhouette at the far end of the hall, blocking the only exit. He didn't rush. He walked toward me with a slow, deliberate certainty, a man coming to finish a job. There was no honor in this fight. Prison had stripped that idea from me completely. Survival was about economy of motion and brutal efficiency. As he closed the distance, I grabbed a heavy wrench from a maintenance cart and threw it at his head. He deflected it easily with his forearm, the impact ringing off the concrete wall, but the motion forced him to break his stride. In that single moment of imbalance, I was on him. I didn't throw a punch. I drove the heel of my palm up under his nose, a sharp upward strike meant to disorient and overwhelm. He stumbled back, his eyes watering, a grunt of pain lost in the noise of the fans. He was bigger and stronger, but I was faster, fueled by an 8-year-old rage that had been honed to a single sharp point. He swung a heavy fist, and I moved inside it, driving my knee into his thigh, feeling the muscle seize. He went down to one knee. I kicked the back of his other leg, forcing him to the ground, and before he could recover, I had his hands behind his back, using his own zip tie restraints to bind his wrists. It was over in less than 10 seconds. I left him on the cold floor and ran. In the grand ballroom, the celebration was reaching its peak. Hundreds of Fletcher's supporters were packed together, their faces turned to the stage, their cheers echoing off the crystal chandeliers. I watched from a shattered balcony as Senator Thomas Fletcher walked to the podium, his wife at his side. He was smiling, a portrait of power and absolute confidence. He raised his hands to quiet the crowd, ready to claim his victory. Then the massive screens behind him flickered. The campaign logos vanished, replaced by the crisp, damning lines of his private ledger. A list of names and numbers, payments to a county sheriff, to a witness, to a victim's family, all labeled under household security expenses. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Before they could process what they were seeing, the image changed, and Nate's voice filled the ballroom. A clear recording played over the hotel's sound system. My dad made it disappear. The murmur became a wave of shocked gasps. The final image to appear on the screens was a live feed from the media hub. Annalise stood before a camera, her face pale but her eyes unwavering. She looked directly into the lens, speaking to the entire room, to the entire state. "My name is Annalise Fletcher," she said, her voice clear and strong, "and I am a witness to a crime my family committed 8 years ago." Chaos erupted. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and Thomas Fletcher stood frozen at the podium, his perfect world shattering in real time, broadcast live for all to see. 6 months later, I stood in front of the Garrison gas station. The for sale sign was faded, the paint peeling, but I held the deed in my hand. The Fletcher dynasty was a ruin of indictments and legal battles. My name was cleared, a quiet fact published in the back pages of the newspapers that had once convicted me. Sal, the old mechanic who used to work for the station's previous owner, walked over from the garage next door and clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. "You didn't just win the game, kid," he said, squinting at the distant, hazy skyline of Kingsport. "You broke the whole damn board." A simple car pulled up to the curb. Annalise got out. She looked tired, but the haunted look was gone from her eyes. She was leaving the state, starting over somewhere new, a place where her last name was not a headline. We stood together for a moment in the comfortable quiet. There was nothing left that needed to be said. We had chosen the difficult truth over the simple satisfaction of revenge, and now we were both free and both alone. "Good luck, Annalise," I said. "You too, Jin Kai," she replied. She got back in her car and drove away without looking back. My parents were on a flight, their new visas approved, coming home to a life I had managed to rebuild from the wreckage. I turned and walked to the front of the station. I found the main breaker and flicked a switch. The old neon open sign flickered for a moment, then settled into a steady, determined glow against the twilight.